We'll talk about Bad Lieutenant first, and I'm no Abel Ferrara historian, but based on my hazy memories of The King of New York, I think by the 90s he'd settled down a bit from his video nasties phase that brought him to the public attention with Driller Killer and Miss 45, the latter being the sort of film that credits him with an acting performance of the character First Rapist as though it's an orchestra or something. But at any rate...
Man, did I pick the wrong time to take a mouthful of orange juice?
At any rate, Bad Lieutenant is very much the sort of film that would have caused Mary Whitehouse to get all hot and bothered about. Harvey Keitel takes the lead as our unnamed New York copper, who, in short order, after we introduced him, will have stolen evidence from a crime scene and a bag of drugs in order to sell to his pet drug dealer, smoked a bit of the old crack, cheated on his wife, and got himself deeper in debt with his bookie on a series of failed baseball bets, and somehow he'll get much worse over the course of the piece. Inasmuch as there's any kind of narrative driver to the film, it's to track down the rapists of Frankie Thorne's Young Nun, an act which we are not spared, although any such sleuthing will have to wait until the lieutenant has sexually assaulted two young women after a traffic stop. This ridiculous spiral will continue until the stress of impending retribution from the bookies and the metric butt ton of drugs and booze causes him to have a meltdown in a church, mewling like Beaker off the Muppets and hallucinating a vision of the Christ, which Mark Kermode says makes this a rightly hailed powerful tale of redemptive Catholicism, which I'll simply call stupid. And so it goes. I first watched this back in my teenage years, and I didn't think all that much of it then, and I don't think time has shifted my opinion of it. It's obviously a filthy old film, but whereas something like Taxi Driver at least presented a character you'd want to pick apart and see what makes Travis typical in that case tick, here the lieutenant is so cartoonishly, pulpishly dreadful that there's little interest to be had with him. We are left only hoping that we will see him being fed into a wood chipper, and that this doesn't happen is surely cinema's biggest missed opportunity.
Sorry, on you go.
I can't fault Keitel's performance, I suppose, as he's certainly committed deeply to the role. Indeed, we see far more of him than any sane person would want to. And if you so desire, I suppose there's some axes you could judge this film as not being bad. However, my overriding issue with it is that I do not discern any useful point to the sleazefest. Keitel is a bad lieutenant, that much is driven home, but I cannot accept a drug-induced freakout, then aiding felons to elude justice, then getting shot as being any sort of redemptive character arc, particularly for a character who deserves much worse. I suppose I'm just too Old Testament. This film is like walling in the mud for 90 minutes, and I suppose there's a use for something like that in cinema, even if I'm damned if I can see one. If cinema's about feeling, then there's perhaps a time for something that makes you feel gross and dissatisfied, like you're covered in a thin film of grease. In short, I'm glad that I do not have to think of this film ever again.
Yes, you're not alone. Narrative fiction, I suppose, can exist or does exist for a great many purposes, Scott, and not all of those purposes are necessarily to be enjoyable. And a piece of narrative fiction can exist and be well made and well crafted and well acted and still not be enjoyable. And here we find ourselves at the doorstep of Bad Lieutenant again. I think, like you, I probably watched this, it must have been round about the same time. And I, as of yet, and having just finished rewatching this about half an hour ago, for the first time since then, I still haven't seen the uncut version, and still found this to be, on second viewing, quite harrowing on a number of occasions. And as we were saying just before we started recording, certainly one of those films that when you're younger, there are a good 3 or 4 moments in the film where it would be most inopportune of your parents to walk into the room. I appreciate this as a character study, but that's all fine and well if it's a character that you want to spend any time with or has any redemptive qualities whatsoever. But Lieutenant, because that's, as far as I'm aware, we never find out this character's name. He's only referred to as the Lieutenant or Lieutenant. Really has no redemptive qualities whatsoever. I read into the ending of the film that he has achieved a personal salvation, and that's great for him. I think I read this as, I wasn't sure how to take this film, I think, when I was a teenager, and I don't remember enjoying it in any capacity whatsoever. Coming back to it now, I can certainly enjoy, or appreciate would be a better word, the depth of Keitel's performance. Yeah, because certainly at one point, at least, he seems to legitimately have a needle placed in his arm. Whether or not it contained heroin, I don't know, and I don't want to know. But I certainly read into this that toward the end of the film, I think understanding that he was cornered and that there was no way he was going to get out of this, he sought personal salvation in treating the nuns, rapists, with the kind of, what's the word I want? With the same forgiveness that she has, and seeing them on their way, believing that somehow will absolve him of all his previous crimes and help him atone him, so that at least he might not burn in the fiery depths of hell forever, if that is what you're inclined to believe in. So I was very happy for him that, in my personal interpretation, at the end of the movie, at least he died, and perhaps the best way possible for this kind of character. But for me as a viewer, yes, slightly less redemptive of an experience. And again, I will, unless a very compelling case is made to watch this again for some sort of purpose in future other than trying to enjoy a movie, I will not be revisiting Bad Lieutenant once more.
Yeah, so I found it a very tough watch. Just because there is so little to like in anything that's going on screen at any point. It is, by design, bleak and sleazy and gritty and just unpleasant, but that's all well and good. It's like that was its goal. It has achieved that goal very well. I just don't think that goal has a lot of value in achieving.
Yeah, there are challenges throughout, but perhaps the biggest challenge, and if we look past there are two significant sexual assaults in this film. One perpetrated by two young men on a nun, and the other by, as you pointed out, and it's a scene which has gained infamy, but by Keitel himself on two young teenage women who he's stopped for a road traffic offence. There are those scenes which individually are challenging, but for me, perhaps the greatest challenge of this film was making it just through the last half hour, which the whole final third of this film, Lieutenant has spiraled so deep into a drug and fueled haze that he literally just can't stand up or walk properly, and just sort of stumbles about mumbling randomly at people for the final. And can't do anything without it taking 5 minutes for the entire final act of this film, and that in itself is perhaps the greatest challenge. And I've seldom have I seen a film that I really wanted to be over that quickly. Can we just get this film over, please? And it was very intent on not being over as quickly as you would like, even for a film which I think only runs to like 90 minutes. And perhaps we should feel ourselves blessed that it doesn't run any longer than that. But my God, is that last half hour going to make you sit through it? But yes, an interesting film. And I'd forgotten, because it's also been a very long time since I've seen Reservoir Dogs, quite how silly Harvey Keitel sounds when he's trying to act emotionally. What's that, Beaker? Okay, Harvey. Okay. I would say take the meds, but you already have. I know that this film has, since its release, has held a reputation as being challenging. I think I perhaps view it as challenging for different reasons now than I did back then as a teenager, where I kind of wanted to wallow in that challenge and be all big and clever and be the guy who saw that film and then immediately didn't understand why. And now as a functioning adult, I find it challenging for other reasons, really, because actually some of the... I can't speak for the unrated version, but certainly the regular home video version, the R-rated US version, actually some of the stuff in that is not timid, but tamer by modern standards than some other more recent films. But still a challenge, and not in a good way. Not in the same way as, say, a Sudoku puzzle.
Yes.
No Sudoku puzzle is Bad Lieutenant.
Yes, will we get any more awards from either Sudoku or